Good morning, everyone. I will open our meeting of Te Puna Kōrero for the 6th of July 2023. To kick us off, Taku, would you like to lead us in karakia? Thank you very much, everyone. Apologies, noting we have an apology from Councillor Nalo. I'll also note Councillors Leggett and Ford are joining us remotely today. I will move the apology. Do I have a seconder? Thank you very much, Councillor Hayward. All those in favour? Opposed? That is carried. Public forum today, so I'll note we've got one speaker in public forum and then a number of speakers after that as part of our first agenda item. Mark, if I'd like to invite you up to speak. Just before you do present, though, I think Andrew just wanted to very quickly speak to the item that you're going to talk to, but feel free to come up.
Just through the chair, item 7.2, the Transport Bylaw Report. I think we should pull that report in its entirety today and bring it back to your next meeting. And the reason is the Spade Place item, where it starts there, that in the narrative we've said we got one submission in opposition, but as we're aware now, we got another submission in opposition that came in slightly late. But as officers, we did have time to put that in the report and say, received a late submission, and when you look at that submission, it's the same person that we've noted in the report in opposition, but there are more residents, 6, 8, 10, 13, 14 Spade Place. So the narrative needs to change in the report, and we need to say something about what they've said in the report. But then the question's gone a wee bit wider. Are there any other late submissions? And I gather there were. And it's also gone, what do we call, when we say two submissions in opposition, but some of those have been 3 or 4 people in the house signing, and what is our practice? And our practice is a wee bit inconsistent. So because we've had a change in officers working in this area, I'd rather get it tidied up. The matters of substance are exactly the matters of substance before you, but it's just the narrative that goes with it. So I think we should certainly hear from the principal in the public forum about the issue, and we just get it back to you with the correct narrative and the correct numbers for all items in your next meeting.
Perfect, thank you. So I understand from a procedure perspective, Wendy, if you pull the paper, we don't need to move a motion, so I'll just let you speak to that.
I'll withdraw the paper.
Okay, cool. So the paper is withdrawn. We'll still hear from Mark Smith, the Principal of Papa Kōwhai School, on this, and the paper itself and voting will happen at our next Te Puna Kōrero meeting. So with that, I will introduce Mark Smith, Principal of Papa Kōwhai School, and my old Year 8 teacher. Good morning, Mark. Thank you very much for coming in. I was trying very hard to make sure I didn't call you Mr. Smith when you walked up. Thanks very much for coming along. So you've got 5 minutes to speak in public forum, and then we've got questions potentially from councillors as well. So I'll hand over to you. Oh, sorry, Mark, if you just... Oh, yeah, it's on now. Go for it.
Thank you. Kia ora. So Papa Kōwhai School, large school, over 500 students at Papa Kōwhai School. We're situated in a little cul-de-sac called Spade Place. It's narrow, it's got a bend in it. We have a number of our families, maybe 70% of our families come from Aotea. So I know people feel nostalgic about, well, all children should just walk to school. Some of our children live more than 5 kilometres away. It's a long walk if you're 5 years old coming to school. So many of our children are coming in vehicles to the school. My memory might not serve me correctly, but about 10 years ago, council put in blue lines down one side of Spade Place and also out into Tweed Road. And thank you for doing that, because that's been a game changer for us. Prior to that, people parked on both sides of a narrow cul-de-sac. You couldn't get in or out of the street. It was just congested every morning. But now that the blue lines are in, we don't have vehicles down one side. Vehicles can easily travel in and out. And at the same time, 2 car parks were put in to the south of our driveway, and that was for the purpose of people being able to pick up, sit down their children in the mornings and after school. Because we're on a bend, because it's a cul-de-sac, you can imagine that just 2 car parks, when you've got 500 children, is not many for setting down children, for picking them up. Children also don't get into the car park nice and quickly. If you've got children of your own, there's car seats. People muck around. There's bags that get left on the side of the road. It's not just a 30-second operation getting 3 children into a motor vehicle. So the reality at the moment, when there are only 2 car parks free to be able to pick up and set down your children, the reality is that we have people stopping in the middle of the street and children are getting in and out of vehicles while the car is running in the middle of the road because there's literally nowhere to stop. So people don't know what to do and they panic and they just set their children down in the middle of the street. Sometimes children have missed... parents have missed their children, so they go round the cul-de-sac and then they are illegally stopping on the blue lines on the other side, and so they're just beckoning their children to run across the road to get into their vehicles, extremely dangerous. People are also stopping over driveways and on orange lines, again, because they just don't know where else to stop. There are only 2 car parks to pull into, and so they don't know where else to go. It also leads to congestion at the dairy and out into Tweed Road because the cars are all backed up. One of the realities at the moment over the last 6 weeks is one of our neighbours has decided he's just going to park his large SUV vehicle in one of the 2 parks that we're talking about right in front of the school gate. That has meant that for the last 6 weeks, parents can't see their children who are waiting to be picked up. It means that the children can't actually see their parents either because people are driving in around the cul-de-sac. There's 2 large vehicles parked right in front of the school gate. You can't actually see the children to be dropped off or picked up. And again, what that causes drivers to be distracted. It causes people to miss picking up their children, and you've all witnessed, I'm sure, when people are frustrated, they're running late in vehicles, people do erratic things at times or make poor judgment around what they are doing. So I, without referencing further to the other submissions, I know that people do get frustrated with traffic outside of schools. We would not be the only school in New Zealand that there is a problem 10 minutes before school starts and 10 minutes after school ends. But we are asking for a health and safety reason that the 2 car parks on the northern side of our driveway that are directly in front of our school gate are available for drop-off and pick-up only for that short period before school and after school, so that traffic can move freely in and out of the street, that children can be seen and are visible, that parents have actually an opportunity to pull into 4 car parks and pick up their children in a safe way. That's what we're asking for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Hayward.
Kia ora, Mr. Smith. What role have you been able to play as a broker with local residents to try and encourage them to not use those parking spaces and prevent this issue from continuing on, irrespective of whatever the bylaws are?
Yeah. So what I've done is I'm down at the gate before school and after school. So some of it is just talking with neighbours when I'm down there. Sometimes I've just, on a little notepad, just left a little note on vehicles just saying, it would be really helpful if you didn't park your vehicle here. Sometimes that's been accepted. Sometimes that has not been greeted well. It's come up with a very aggressive response. So newsletters, some of the residents are parents of the school, so we'd also get the messaging through our newsletter. But the main way is every morning before school and after school, I'm down at the gate in my high-vis vest so people can come and talk, and then I can also talk with neighbours. One of our neighbours has recently been to our Board of Trustees meeting, and we've had a conversation about how we can work together.
This may be open to, but can you give me a sense of what bike usage is with the tauira at your kura?
Bike usage? Yeah. So Papakōwhai, it's not easy biking terrain if you're just a little person. We do get a number of children biking from Aotea. They come through by Countdown Supermarket, through the little dirt road into Eskdale and come down that way. We're part of Moving March. You know, we really encourage children to be biking and walking. We've got a walking school bus in terms 1 and 4 to try and encourage more walking. We've really tried doing walking school bus in winter. It lasts for about 3 weeks into May, and then everyone just doesn't want to do it anymore. So really through terms 2 and 3, there is probably little biking and walking school bus, but certainly terms 1 and 4, there is good uptake.
Mayor Baker.
Thank you. Remind me, have you got a back entrance that parents can pick and drop from?
Yeah, so there are really 3 entry points to the school. There's also Yarrow Place, which has Papakōwhai Kindy, so that has other problems again, just because there are more pickups and drop-offs in that street. And then also from Cromarty Place, up above the school, there's a zigzag path that comes down, and we certainly encourage people to use those three entry points. I have been led to believe that there could be some consideration to a road opening from Countdown through into Eskdale Road at some point in the future, and if vehicles were able to just come through from Aotea up there, I think we could more strongly encourage access at that Cromarty Place entry.
This has been going on since I started on council in 2010 or 9 or whatever it was.
That's right.
And the neighbours have not changed their view. Have we looked, or have you looked at possibly pickups on Tweed Road so that we have like a drive-through zone? I know we've got a bus stop out there.
Yeah.
But instead of coming into the cul-de-sac, it is so tiny. And I see that from the photos from other people, there are people still parking on those blue lines.
Yeah, but at the before and after school times, not too bad, because I'm out there moving people along. Out on Tweed Road, again, you've got it's on a rise. We've got no parking on one side of the street. There's a pedestrian crossing operating out on Tweed Road. So it's also just quite a complex and busy environment. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor, we're happy.
Thanks. I guess my question was along the same lines as Councillor Hayward regarding addressing the issue, in particular with the resident with the SUV. So what kind of feedback have you received from that particular resident? Because that's obviously, at the moment, one of the most frustrating things for you. And I acknowledge, as a parent of Parimata School, I understand totally the frustration as a parent, but acknowledge that your street is a lot tighter. But in regards to that particular resident, what kind of feedback have you received directly from them? In your own words.
Yeah, look, we've had a number of interactions that the particular resident has now sold their house, so that might actually resolve the issue. Just feeling very angry that he should be able to park the car in any place in the street that he chooses, and that it was unfair that the school took up so much of the parking and the traffic in the street. Again, Papakōwhai School has been there for nearly 50 years. The residents, I've been at Papakōwhai School for 20 years. I'm not I'm just trying to recall if there's maybe only one or two now that have actually been there longer than I have in 20 years, and I would propose that no resident moved into the street without the school being there. We were aware at the time of purchasing that Papa Kōwhai was in the street.
Are there any further questions? Looks like that's everything from everyone else. Mark, I'll just ask as well, beyond the report that we're discussing here, is there anything else or any further support you feel that the school needs from the council? It sounds to me like this is a genuine safety issue. Is there anything else, I guess, or any suggestions that you have for us?
Well, look, we've really appreciated the work around the lines. That's been really helpful. Margot, who comes to do the parking, is she's a superstar. She takes there's no prisoners there. There's no excuses. So regular visits from council parking wardens really helps us, because I'm just the principal of the school. I can't ask people to move people on. People often look to me and go, well, Mark, you really need to do something. I'm like, I have no authority to ticket people or to move vehicles. So regular support from council, I guess, for our school and also for the other schools across Porirua. The council are always very good at responding when I ring up and go, it's getting really tricky, I need someone to come. Someone always comes, but probably just if there was any scope to just have a regular cycle where schools are being visited on a regular basis would be highly advantageous to us.
Cool, thank you. And my last question would just be, you noted the safety concerns. Have there been any significant incidents or near misses in Spey Place?
Near misses for sure. So I'm not aware of anyone being injured over that time, but certainly that's not we don't want to wait for that to happen. Certainly I have had to step in at different times, and I know that I've witnessed myself a number of brakes being jammed on as children are actually accessing vehicles in the street, and I think that is the main reason why I've come today, is because we just need cars to be able to pull in safely, pick up their children and be gone. This is really just for a small, even the before school is not really a big issue, it is really just after school is the main time, and it is a 10 to 15 minute time in the day that we just need vehicles to be able to pull in safely and move on, and then it's gone. Yeah, that's what we're really asking for.
Cool. Thanks very much, Mark.
Thank you.
All the best. Cheers.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah, so just noting that that paper, the next TPK meeting is the 17th of August, I understand, so it will come back for that TPK meeting. All right, that brings us to the end of our initial public forum with other speakers speaking as part of core agenda items, which brings us to conflicts of interest. Does anyone have a conflict of interest? No. There are notifications of extraordinary business. There are no items of extraordinary business. Confirmation of minutes from our 22 June meeting. I will move that to get it on the table. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Duncan, thank you very much. Are there any corrections to the minutes? No? All right. All those in favour? Opposed? That is carried. That brings us to item 7.1, the Speed Management Plan 2023 to 30 hearings. To start off, I'll move the report to open it for discussion. Could I have a seconder? Councillor Johnson, thank you very much. So I'll note we have 6 oral submitters who are speaking to us today, who have each been given 10 minutes, including questions. So there will be a bell that rings at the 8-minute mark. So if you're still speaking at 8 minutes and you want time for questions, that's the time that we'll ask you to begin wrapping up. I'll remind councillors that for the submissions themselves, you can ask questions of clarification, but we're not here today to have a debate with our submitters. And obviously, these are the hearings today. We're not making any substantive decisions that will come back to council at a later time. So to begin, I'd like to invite Dominic Croft. Dominic here? Does not appear to be here. So our second oral submitter was Bob Osborne. No, all right. Well, we're moving through this much quicker than I'd expected. Madison Roberts. Is Madison here? All right. Okay. Peter Agnew. Here we go. Fourth time's the charm. Thanks very much, Peter.
I go here.
Yep, if you just take a seat there, you'll see the microphone. I think the green light is on. Yep, that's on.
Yes, it is, yes.
Cool, so you have 10 minutes. You don't have to use all that time if you don't want to.
Sure thing.
Fire away.
Yeah, as my surname is Agnew, I'm often used to being called first for things, so... Yeah, so it's refreshing not to be first for a change. Well, tēnā koutou, everybody. It's good to be here. Haven't actually been to an actual council meeting before, so it's very interesting to see how these things are run. So it's a little bit of an education for me as well. Yes, so thank you very much for your time today, and I've actually got my submission here in front of me. Presumably you have read it, so I won't quote chapter and verse, so I will just quickly go through broadly just the main points in my submission. So I'll start with the good things, and there are some aspects to this plan that I am in favour of. I think obviously the increase of the speed of the Waitangarua Road link up to 70 kilometres an hour makes a lot of sense. I think that would be broadly welcomed by most, although I question the need to reduce it to 30 kilometres as you approach the intersection with Warspite Ave. I also think that the 30-kilometre speed limit proposal in Keneperu Flat also makes a lot of sense, and I'm in favour of, given the density of the residential development in there. And I think Keneperu Flat is a suburb like no other in Porirua before. That makes a lot of sense. It's dense, the roads are narrow, 30 kilometres an hour, I think, is a reasonable speed for that area. In terms of central Porirua, there is an arguable case for a blanket 30 kilometre an hour speed limit. Again, I can sort of see both sides of the debate on this one, but I just wonder if a 30 kilometre speed limit would actually be little more than cosmetic. I say that just because of the sheer volume of traffic most of the time in the central city. If you go to Paramoana Street, for instance, you've got traffic crawling along there at little more than 20 kilometres an hour most of the time. And say outside of business hours, late at night or early in the morning, a speed limit of 50 k's might be more appropriate there. So I'm sort of on the fence a little bit on that one. So those are the things I'm broadly supportive of. Just my chief concern with the management plan, and I suspect this has probably been referred to as well in many other submitters who haven't come to see you in person today, and that is with the one-size-fits-all 100-metre radius proposal outside our schools and marae. Now, I have a few concerns with this, very broadly speaking, of course, is that when it comes to policy, and I understand obviously you've got speed management rules, you've got waka kotahi, you've got the government, but I think a local authority needs to say to themselves, okay, then this is maybe what a government agency wants us to do, but what should we do? What's the situation we are dealing with here? And problem definition is an important part of evidence-based policy. Do we actually have a serious problem in Porirua City with children being injured or killed on our roads? I did a little bit of research of this. There's probably something that I'm not aware of, but I would answer in the negative. And I was a little concerned to read in the draft plan that there was no specific case set out arguing that injuries involving children are a major problem in the city, which is a bit of a red flag for me. Secondly, not all pedestrians in the city are school children or marae attendees, and they don't stay within a 100-metre radius of schools. They are everywhere. Of course, we don't want school children being killed or injured, but we don't want any pedestrians being killed or injured. We want everybody safe. So there's also the whole issue there I say about speed not being the only cause of crashes on our roads. I won't go into that. I think those arguments are probably fairly well known. But I guess another problem I have too with the 100-metre radius is that I don't think it would be very easy to enforce. Our police are having enough problems at the moment trying to enforce speed limits in residential areas in Porirua City Council. In Tahi Bay Road, for instance, the 50k stretch from Te Peni Avenue to Onipoto Road, still a lot of people into Tahi Bay don't respect that 50-kilometre speed limit and still drive at 70k's, and they seem to do so with impunity. And that probably brings me to my final point. I was concerned that the council doesn't seem to view Tahi Bay Road or Whitford Brown Avenue as urban connector roads. I think, given their importance of both these roads to the flow of traffic, Tahi Bay Road's the only link between Tahi Bay and the wider world, that a speed limit of 30k's, correct me if I'm wrong, in that area outside Tahi Bay Intermediate is actually improper and unrealistic, and I don't think that should go ahead. Similar for Whitbread Brown Avenue. Again, maybe Marae can be a place where people congregate, but I don't think the issues there are serious enough to warrant, obviously, a 30k limit in that area. So what is my alternative proposal? I'm basically endorsing page 15 of the speed management plan. It's what it's known as the Australian system, where you focus in on the actual pedestrian crossings that children use outside schools every day and basically put in temporary speed limits of 30k's between, say, 8 and 9 a.m, 3 and 4 p.m. on days when school children are attending school. I must admit, listening to the principal of Papakowhai School before, I sort of realised that maybe there could be some specific issues for every school that might need to be dealt with individually. And so perhaps in addition to what happens in page 15, you maybe enter conversations with every individual school in this area and perhaps deal with their specific concerns on a case-by-case basis, but not this one-size-fits-all 100-metre radius approach. So, councillors, that is my submission, and thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Peter. Are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Duncan.
Thanks, Peter. That was an impressive submission you put forward. One thing in it that intrigued me was you were saying that the reduction of speed wouldn't necessarily mean a saving in CO2 emissions, if you like. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Good to see you again, by the way.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah, I acknowledge, as I say in my submission, that there is some debate on this topic, but you know, the internal combustion engine still is a large part of, emissions in the city, as indeed in every city. And during my research for my submission, I drove a number of internal combustion engine powered cars at different speeds to determine how they would react at 50 as opposed to 30k. And I found that almost without exception, at 30k, you can really drive no higher than second gear. And as a result, the rev counter was up, the engine was working really hard, and at higher revs, an engine uses more fuel, which results in more carbon emissions. So I think, that part of it it's an unconvincing argument to me that somehow we can reduce carbon emissions by forcing internal combustion engine cars to drive at higher speeds. I think the gradual increase in electronic vehicles and plug-in hybrids, which we are seeing, is actually doing a lot more to reduce carbon emissions in our city than just, reducing speeds down to 30 kilometres an hour.
Yeah. Thanks.
Councillor Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hey, thanks for coming in today. I just had some queries around your. You had some comments around the speed outside schools, and I wasn't sure if you were aware that in 2012 there was a 7-year-old who was hit outside Cannon Street School and passed away. Last year there was a kid that was hit outside Tairangi School, and they've also had quite a few near misses outside Tairangi School. So I just wondered, you said you did some research on that in that area. Could you please elaborate on that space?
Thanks for that. Yes, I was aware of both of those cases, and I'm certainly not minimising and saying that the safety of school children is not an issue. I think it is, and we have seen some unfortunate examples in recent times where children have been killed or injured or even near misses. And that, I guess, is why I am supportive, as I say, of what the management plan is proposing on page 15, that we do take some steps to try and minimise the risks where children tend to congregate outside schools. I guess, though, and I mean, this is where it all comes down to a little bit of bean counting in a way, doesn't it? Oh, sorry, is my time up?
I have 2 minutes left.
Oh, I have 2 minutes, okay. You know, we need to design, I guess, an approach that's proportional to the problem. If we had a situation where we had school kids being killed or injured routinely on a weekly or even daily basis, something like a 100-metre radius around schools as proposed in the plan, I think, would actually make a lot of sense and would get my strong support. But as things are now, I just don't think we are having the kind of incidents in our city that warrants the 100-metre radius approach. I think it would be far better for us to identify where children cross the road and just focus exclusively on improving safety in those areas where children actually access school grounds.
Not for nothing, but I think the families of those children probably would have.
Oh, I agree. It's tragic. And, you know, as I say, nobody wants to see pedestrians, school children otherwise being killed or injured, and it's terrible. But, you know, sometimes in life, I guess we do all we can reasonably to, you know, improve the safety of people, to get information out there, to address the dangers. But unfortunately, in this world we live in, it's imperfect, and sometimes accidents, injuries, and even deaths do occur.
Did you have anything further, Izzy? Just noting your hand is still up. Cool, thank you. Are there any other, Councillor Philo?
Hey, thank you, Peter, for coming in. Yeah, it was a great presentation. I wondered if you could expand a little bit more on what you mentioned regarding what they do in Australia with the when it's, you know, school hours or when children are crossing. Is that like a sign that says between these hours reduce your speed to 30,
right.
or like, can you give some context to that?
What's happening in Australia if you drive in any residential area or indeed anywhere where there is a school? So you will first approach a sign that will say school zone ahead, and it will mention very briefly the hours where the special speed limit starts. Then your next encounter will be a speed limit sign with a changeable speed. So it will flash school and it will have the special limit up. Typically what happens in many of these areas too is that there are actually speed cameras or some kind of enforcement. So in addition to be warning about the special sign, there is usually a speed camera to catch drivers who are, oh sorry, is my time up?
Yeah, you can wrap up what you're saying.
Yeah, I'll
and
just
your
wrap
time is
up, yeah. There will also typically be judder bars. This will usually be about 50 metres either side of the pedestrian crossing. And then so you'll be basically forced to slow down anyway. You will go through that pedestrian crossing where the school is. There will, of course, be, you know, usual additional signs up cross now where the school children may enforce it as well. And then once you're through, there might be another judder bar. Then you'll go past another sign that will say school zone ends, return to ordinary speed limit. And that's typically between, say, 8 and 9 a.m. and 3 and 4 p.m. during a school day.
Thank you.
Cool, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Peter.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your time, everyone.
And we appreciate you coming.
Yeah. No problem.
All right, and Councillor, sorry, I should have just noted for those following along, Peter's submission is submission number 81. Next, Roger Gadd, and Roger's submission number 96. Welcome forward, Roger.
Moreno. Yes, well, thank you for the opportunity to submit and talk about my submission. Yeah, please bear with me because I'm not as accustomed to public speaking as perhaps many of the other submitters are. In this oral submission, I will talk about my underlying thinking behind my submission and conclude with a summary or list of the key points of my written submission. Some of what I say or will say here goes beyond my written submission, but I believe the points are to some extent implicit in what I said. So first point of my thinking, and I'll dial back what I'd written and dial back on what was in my written submission. I believe that the financial cost benefit is not always the most appropriate means of initially assessing a safety initiative, as I perceive the proposed speed changes to be, but also to look at time and how much time is actually it costs the general public its emissions, recognising, of course, that a loss of life is tragic and therefore bears a higher weight than simply the sum of lost time by having to drive slower or wait longer at a set of traffic lights. But anyway, that's my point, is that I wonder if the lost time has been adequately assessed in looking at the cost-benefit analysis of the proposed speed limit changes. And the second point, my thought is that multiple changes in speed limit are confusing to drivers, and this is a point made by one or two people I've discussed the proposed speed management plan with, and this confusion particularly applies to those who are unfamiliar with the area. The third point I'd make is the speed limit should only, I suggest that the speed limit should only be lowered where traffic volumes have increased beyond those of the era when the current speed limit was set. And that increases to a point that it is no longer safe to travel at the marked limit at most times. I also proffer that this is a point in favour of lowering speed limits. When existing speed limits were set, there was no tolerance applied to travelling up to 10 kilometres per hour over the posted speed limit, and I think the speed limit tolerance is a problem that often encourages drivers to drive at a speed that is unsafe to the local conditions. Again, a point perhaps in favour of lowering speed limits, although I note my submission, I'm generally opposed to the lowered speed limits, but I recognise that there are arguments in favour of them. The main points of my submissions that I would emphasise or add to are, firstly, where it is proposed to lower an existing 70 kilometre per hour speed limit to 50 kilometres per hour, I suggest 60 kilometres per hour is sensible, practical and safe, and will reduce will less significantly impact travel time. I ask that you sincerely consider this for Tutahi Bay Road, which is of course proposed to lower the speed limit for its entire length, except outside the school at the north, to 50 kilometres per hour. The second point, I suggest that there be no 70 kilometre per hour speed limits in Porirua, but rather 60 kilometre per hour be applied, where a speed limit a bit greater than 50 kilometre per hour is deemed optimal. And that's semi-implicit in my original written submission. A point that goes beyond my original submission, referring to the first full paragraph of page 16 of the speed management plan, I wonder, and I presume, I don't know whether that's the full document, but the document that was available online that I based on my submission on, I wonder whether the council might consider applying 20 kilometre per hour increments for speed limits throughout Porirua, and including limits under 80 kilometres per hour, with the only exceptions being 50 kilometre per hour limits for thoroughfares such as Champion Street, Mungavin Avenue, the northern section of Tutahi Bay, Kenepuru Drive, etc. There are numerous roads that fit into that, and I'm sure there are many I've never driven down that applies to. Under this scenario, the speed limit on all side streets might be set to 40 kilometres per hour, with this limit being rigorously enforced near school entrances around opening and closing time. I suggest that as something that's being considered, not necessarily optimal, but it is a thought that may be worth considering. And finally, point 4 of my points to emphasise, and although it is outside the remit of this discussion, but I would suggest that the council should install roundabouts at the intersections of, and there are 3 I'd suggest, firstly Waitangarua Link Road and Tiara Kawhahu, secondly Tatahi Bay Road and Tipeni Avenue. That would solve a lot of the safety issues at that intersection. And the third one, which I think would be a very low-cost exercise, although it would mean removing 5 car parks that I count, at the intersection of Hagley Street and Littleton Avenue. I was personally involved in a minor accident there where someone drove out of the base of the T and thankfully collided with my bumper bar. Had I not accelerated, they would hit the side of the car. So, or if I'd hit the brakes, they would hit the side of the car. But, addition to what I've actually typed up yesterday evening, I mentioned that no one actually mentioned the speed limit changes was aware of the proposal, and they were quite surprised. So this indicates that there was is low community awareness. People in Tatahi Bay were very concerned about the lowering of the speed limit at the north end of Tatahi Bay roads. And I should mention that in my submission here, I've taken the assumption that the proposal and what is likely to happen is that the speed limits will be permanently lowered at those in those areas. I think that's everything I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roger. Are there any questions from councillors? Councillor, we're happy.
Thank you, Roger, and I actually think you did a great job at presenting your submission. I just want to go back to, you mentioned lost time quite a bit in your submission, and I just wanted to get clarification from you that if speed limits were to drop, then lost travel time to and from isn't actually an issue for you?
It is an issue.
That it is an issue?
Yes, I think in my submission, I kind of concluded that with the action of the government changing the right-hand give-way rules to left-turning traffic having the right-of-way, there's a particular intersection that I travelled through, at the time travelled through regularly in Johnsonville, where it was something over 2 minutes additional delay just from the change in the give-way rule, that they redesigned the intersection at great cost, I think, to try and overcome that problem. But they, I was actually literally losing 8 hours a year. And sort of when you take this across an entire population, the loss of time and loss of productivity and general enjoyment of life is significant.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
Are there any further questions from councillors? There does not appear to be. So thank you very much, Roger. We appreciate your submission.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we have Isabella Cawthorne. And Isabella's submission is number 98.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Thank you for the opportunity to come and speak. I will make 2 points, really. Firstly, people respond to our environment. And secondly, let's lean into change. So let's crack it. You hear a lot, especially given that Waka Kotahi has put out speed management guidance instructions to council, you hear a lot of what you can probably call local pride, aka local parochialism, that says that might be all very well for insert place here, but we're special. That might be all well and good for Auckland or Christchurch or New Plymouth, but we're different here. And there's, as local councillors, there's a lot of response to that. I'm sure you want to be representing your community in its unique specialness. Where it comes to vehicles and roads, and especially where those roads are actually supposed to be functioning as streets, i.e. places or destinations where you want people to be moving around on foot, interacting with each other, having a chat, maybe buying some coffee or whatever, you actually have to come back down to physics. There is physics involved when a solid object hits into a human body. There is no difference between a bumper hitting a child in Mozambique or Monkhaven Avenue. There is no difference in a bumper hitting anyone anywhere around the world. It's a physical body and a solid object. So where we hear lots of calls to be a bit unique in Porirua, I would ask you to just think really carefully about what is universal to humans and what is genuinely different in Porirua. So there is lots and lots and lots of really good psychological research about how people respond to our physical environments when we're behind a wheel, when we're walking along, when we're just being in a street. And that the gist of that comes down to if the signals that your brain is picking up when you're on a street encourage you to behave a certain way, you're probably going to behave that way. It doesn't matter if you're a good person or if you're highly motivated or whatever, you will be inclined to behave that way. If you, for example, are receiving signals from your environment that it might not be a bit safe, you might not feel anxious, but there are lots of big, fast things moving around, you're going to just, subconsciously constrain your behaviour a little bit. You might not let go of your child's hand, for example, even if they really want to run ahead. You might hesitate before crossing the road, even if there's a shop over there that you really want to go and visit. You might, when you're thinking about maybe whether you might, walk to the shops or jump on a bike one day, you might be like, maybe not. So even when we're not aware of it, our environment constrains our behaviour. Conversely, when you are inside a car, you have all of that amazing infrastructure around you. You've got A pillars and B pillars, you've got a bumper, you've got your air conditioning and your music and all those good things. You're also responding to your environment. And as I'm sure we're all aware, when you're being told to slow down by a sign, but the environment around you says, it looks pretty good, there's lots of space, what do? We tend to speed up a little bit. And we all have this experience, right? It doesn't take very much to make you go, oh, crap, I'm going a little bit fast here. Or if you're normally getting slowed down by a bunch of traffic in front of you, you get a bit of a clear gap. You're like, oh, great. We all do this, right? It's not because we are bad people or whatever. It's because our environment is sending signals to us. So when we hear people say, oh, there's not a problem in Porirua, especially where people say, I did my research and I looked at the stats and there's actually not a problem. There are two things to be aware of here. Our environment has been shaping our behaviour in this town and in all the towns around New Zealand for the last 80 to 100 years because we have largely built our streets to be a nice experience when you're driving, which is partly why we're all driving so much. But in so doing, they constrain us a little bit from everything else outside a car. The second point I'd just like to make is about the crash stats. You can go and look up CAS if you want. It's publicly available. What you're not going to see in CAS is the near misses. You're actually also not going to see quite a lot of actual crashes, especially where they happen in places like Eastern Porirua, where people, for various good reasons, might not think it's worthwhile to go in and fill a report and talk to the police. So the crash stats only tell the very, very tip of the iceberg of the story. The thing to keep remembering is how people respond to our environments. And if we are concerned about the fact that kids aren't walking and biking to school, if we're concerned about the fact that when you get old in Porirua, you have to move into a retirement village because it's not safe to just stay in your home and walk down the streets, there is reason for that. We are responding to our environment. And this brings me to the second point. There's an old adage in traffic engineering which goes, if you have to keep telling everybody to slow down, you've designed your road wrong. I know everybody, right? You'll always have to tell some people who are basically dorks to slow down because they get off on racking people up and being obnoxious. So very small minority there. But if you're having to tell everyone to slow down all the time, it's not because everyone's evil. It's because you've designed the road wrong. And we have been designing our roads in New Zealand when we didn't know any better, right? Again, it's not that the traffic engineers are bad people, but we had a bunch of assumptions about what was good, what was right, what was worthwhile doing. We now have an awful lot more information, including psychological information about how we're shaped by our roads and streets. So when people go, this is acceptable, this is a minimum standard, or NZS 404, for example, these things were written in an earlier age. They are not fit for purpose for now, let alone for the future that we want. So I'd just like to encourage you as councillors to lean into the fact that we're in a really great time of change. If we want to go back to the excellent road safety strategy that Porirua has from 2020, I believe, you want to look at how the transport network in Porirua can help make Porirua a better place to live, to work, to play, to learn, to buy stuff, to be in the environment. How are you going to use the road and street network, the transport network, so it's actually helping that? So it's not giving to Porirua with one hand but taking with the other. And when we think about how the transport networks of New Zealand are helping the towns or hindering the towns, there are some really important changes that are coming through from that new research. There are new design guidelines. There are new design standards coming through. The value of travel time has recently been updated by Waka Kotahi, little known fact. There's been an increase in the value of people's time. Crucially, it's also been increased for when you are outside a car. So if you're in a bus and you're being held up, or if you're walking and you're being held up, the value of time for you is now being acknowledged. The other thing that's recently been increased is the value of life. So the value of a statistical life, which, yes, is an actual number that Treasury uses, has recently been significantly increased, much more than the value of time when you are driving or moving around. And that's because there's a difference. If you are driving or moving around and your time is taken up, that's a very different thing from if your safety is being put at risk. So the proposals in front of you are, I've got to say, I've been looking at these around the country. This is a really light version. This is pretty feeble, actually. And it was a little bit disappointing to see this coming out of a council with such a strong road safety strategy. So there may be perfectly good reasons, but lean into this change, lean into the fact that we respond to our environments and that there's a real potential for Porirua to become a better place to live if we use our transport network properly. Lower speeds help. It's just physics. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isabella. Are there any questions, Mayor Baker?
It's probably not a, well, it is, isn't it? Isn't, sorry, Isabella.
Let's dig into that.
Yeah. Well, we're moving great. We've all got e-cars, we've got the scooters. They're all silent. And the pedestrians are not hearing them. Mm-hmm. The drivers aren't fast enough. I wonder what your view on that was, because now we've got new, even the buses, and it is so silent and so dangerous.
This is the core of it is how bad do you want it to be when someone makes a mistake? Because people do. And even with internal combustion engines being noisy, sometimes people will make a mistake and step out in front of a thing. When we're in a car and we want to change from ZM to the Breeze, look, you make a mistake, right? So do you want those mistakes to be basically guaranteed that somebody's going to get stretchered away? Or do you want those mistakes to be where everybody gets a bit of a fright, but everybody can walk away? And that's the difference between 50 k's an hour, you're around 75, 80% likely that someone's going to get stretchered away. 30 k's an hour, about 10%. It's just physics. So it's a crucial point. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from other councillors? Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thanks, Isabella. A number of the submissions, in fact, a great majority of them, talked of driver frustration with having to drive at 30 kilometres an hour. Do you consider that doesn't actually apply, or?
Oh, it's an absolutely real thing. And part of the issue is that we have had 60, 70, 80 years of being told, including subconsciously told by our street environment, that that's what we're entitled to. And, I feel it myself, even when I'm driving through Plympton, where I have the most incentive to drive really carefully and nicely because I know everybody there. If there's a whole bunch of traffic and somebody's dithering, I feel grumpy about that. But that's because everything around me is telling me that I'm entitled to go at 50. There's a number up there. Yes, there are signs saying slow zones, but they're not legally enforceable. So driver frustration is a real thing. And the thing to remember is that it's not our fault, right? Of course we're going to be frustrated because we've been told that this is the most important thing. It's not, but that's what we've been told.
Are there any other questions from other councillors? Looks like that's all of them. I do have a question very quickly. When you said that it looks like our proposal is quite light, I wonder if you could just speak a little bit to the types of things that you would have hoped to have seen, or any potential changes or proposals that you would have.
Well, I'm not an expert in this stuff, right? So caveat, but I'm an armchair expert, so I do quite a lot of reading. I'm a bit of a transport nerd. What I'd been hoping to see is firstly a much stronger, like, strategic management context for these changes. I was really hoping to see, this is what we're wanting to do with living and working and learning and moving around in Porirua. These are the places where we know that the trajectory of change for these streets has to be in this direction, has to be gradually more and more and more about people, so that these places are better to live in and move around in. I didn't see very much of that. Secondly, in terms of this much cited radius of 100 metres, that's pretty short, to be quite honest. That is not the kind of distance that is being usefully used. Even now, schools are having walking zones. So you'll have a PO where people meet and the walking bus will start. They're 500 metres away from the school in many cases, right? So it's 100 metres really seems like the absolute bare minimum, which has been designed not for how do we want kids to be and how do we want families to experience this street, but what is the absolute bare minimum we can get away with by going, this Waka Kotai is making us do it. So if we were instead thinking about how do we want Porirua children, not just now but in the future, to experience these streets, how do we want families to experience these streets when people are moving in? Do we want them to think, I have kids, I'm going to have to drive them to school because of the state of these roads? Or do we want them to think, I'm going to move in here, my kid's 2 at the moment, by the time she starts school, this street's going to be safe enough that she can walk with her friends. So let's take that perspective and work backwards from the outcome to set these radii.
Cool, thank you very much. All right, I think that's all of our questions. Thanks very much, Isabella. I will just, Councillor Ford had a question. Sorry, I missed that.
Hey, all good, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep, go for it.
Oh, sweet. Thanks, Isabella, for coming in. I think what you raise, and I think it sort of connects back to the principle that came in earlier on, Mark. It's managing the behaviour of people, it feels like. Can you speak a little bit to that? Because, yeah, I guess that's kind of the crux of it. People slow down, go to the speed limit, but they want to go faster. They feel entitled and all that sort of carry on. Can you speak a little bit to that?
So this is an excellent point. It was quite kind of fortuitous to have Mark speaking earlier. If we think about the choices that people make when they get up in the morning and they go, right, I've got to get kids to school, got to go work, got to do groceries, got to do that, and we think about the array of transport choices that might feel real and usable to them. At the moment, Porirua pretty much only offers walking a bit, not great, and driving. So if you're thinking about getting your kids to school, if it's hilly and if they're little, you don't have any choice, you just drive. And then once you're in the road network and you're driving along and you see all the cars whizzing around, it's like, I'm not going to chuck my kid out of the car, a kilometre away and get them to walk, even though that probably would only be like 20, 30 minutes. And then, once you're in the car, you're like, I'll drop them at the gate because that's what's nice. It's a nice, kind parent thing to do. And it doesn't take much for us to kind of get into this mindset where we have to stay in the car as long as possible. So I would just beg councillors to think about how much our brains are being shaped by the environment that you, as our city authority, and Waka Kotahi and, land transit and so forth over the years have created for us, and how much that is shaping us. And help change that environment over time. Gradually turn the dial on these streets. Yes, stick up a lollipop sign, but then gradually amp up the enforcement, gradually reshape the street environment, use your safe hit posts, use your new markings, gradually change when you do your surface renewals, shift those curbs in, just keep the changed trajectory rolling over time so that our streets help us be the people we want to be. I hope that answered your question. Nice
All right.
broad one.
Thanks very much, Isabella. Much appreciated. So I will just very quickly checking. I don't think we have anyone online, but the three from the start: Dominic, Bob, Madison. We haven't had anyone else come in, have we? No. Okay, cool. Well, we do still have their written submissions. So in terms of the recommendations we're looking at here, so a reminder, we're not making any decisions today. We are receiving these submissions, including the oral submissions, noting that there are 2 late submissions, which we are agreeing to receive as well. And in particular, I'll just draw your attention to recommendation 6, that we will be receiving a deliberations report with analysis of all submissions received at our TPK meeting on the 17th of August 2023. So it's already been moved and put on the table, so I will put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. That would bring us to item 7.2, which we note has been withdrawn. So we'll move straight through to item 7.3, the Streamside Program Implementation. I'll move the report to open it for discussion. To have a seconder, Mayor Baker, thank you very much. And I will invite Nigel to speak to this report.
Just quickly, Mr. Chair, got to shoot to Porphyry.
Cool. No worries. Thank you very much, Taku.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I think Daryl's going to go and find Nigel. I just saw him walk out of the chamber, so picked the wrong time to walk out.
Oh, that's not a problem.
If you just give us one moment.
Cool. Well, I'm happy to temporarily adjourn the meeting for a couple of minutes. People want to stretch their legs, and we'll come back when Nigel's returned. We're on item 7.3. It has been moved and seconded, is on the table, and yes, I will invite Nigel to speak to it. Thanks very much, Nigel.
All right. My apologies, I just ducked out for a glass of water. Okay, this is a report just setting out how we've gone with the Streamside programme this year. It's been quite exciting to see the team really get to grips with new contractors and working with landowners. We've certainly achieved a lot in terms of working with people in Pautanui and Horakiu catchments, and it's been really good to have a better relationship with the operational teams at Greater Wellington, and that's one of our key priority sites in Belmont Regional Park, and they've certainly worked hand in hand with us. It was a little bit disappointing to have Sustainable Coastlines withdraw, but we have managed to fill that gap and kept the ministry happy at the same time. Our new schools coordinator has definitely made an impact out there, and we've got over 800 very happy little students out there who've done a fantastic job recently. And our community groups are by and large, really working well with us. So overall, I'm hopefully able to take any questions you may have.
Cool, thank you very much. So we'll open up for questions. Councillor Hayward.
Kia ora, hea mana. Nigel, thank you very much for coming in and for this report. I am also enthusiastic about the progress that has been made so far and obviously encouraged by what could be achieved. I know I won't be the only person around the table who sees that. I have some questions. He pātai tuatahi. 7A, pest control. Is mentioned in the working alongside. Do we collect information about the statistics of pest control that's working in alignment with the planting program?
Yes, we certainly do. Yep.
So, follow us up. Yamana, sup? Right. So, what are the strategic underpinnings around what we are trying to achieve with regards to pest reduction? Do we have specific goals in alignment with that?
Yep, absolutely. I think the intent is to make sure that any pests that may be in stream corridors are not damaging the work that we're putting in, and obviously we're trying to work in with the parks team and the wider reserve network, and obviously Greater Wellington as well, to ensure that overall pest numbers are reduced.
So just so I'm clear here, we're talking about reduction. Do we have in our head a goal in terms of reduction, or is this about setting baselines and then just trying to reduce overall?
Setting baselines and reducing overall. So we've just started this from last year, and the data is starting to come through now.
Okay. Is it possible in future for us to get some data around that side of things in future reports?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Okay.
We are producing we're in the process of developing our GIS capability, and so each area that will be either planted or have pest control will actually be described online, and you'll be able to see the actual locations.
Cool. Point 9. Can you give some expansion as to what this approach of mātauranga Māori is going to mean for those who are actually doing the planting? How is this going to work in practice in terms of integrating the work of the rurunga?
Okay. We work with Luke Barnsley's team, who's the operational arm of Ngāti Toa, and they work alongside us on most projects that we've got in place. And Luke and his team are certainly working with us on developing the Mātauranga Māori framework, and that will be incorporated into an analysis of how well we're doing towards the end of the program.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Sub. Just to clarify, so for those tamariki who are those 800 who are coming to do planting, how does Mātauranga Māori impact what they're doing, or how does that fit in with the experience that a person who's participating in that process of planting those plants?
Right. It's a core part of the teaching that we do, and it's a requirement when you do learning experiences outside the classroom. So the teacher that we've got is well versed in that, and where necessary, we ask Luke and the team to come in and provide extra advice. We also work directly with Ngāti Toa on the three streams next to the marae. So those are totally focused on where we need to go for that.
Okay, next question.
Sorry, I think Ruben wanted to add to that.
Through the chair also, thank you. We're also working with Ngāti Toa to align our community days planting with the maramataka. So the day that community day planting happens is also quite fortunately the ideal day for Māori planting on the maramataka too. So we're trying to indigenise some of those practices.
Kia pai tērā. Point 37, talking about working with local property owners. I'm going to put you on the spot here, Nigel, I'm sorry. Can you give perhaps an anecdote of a positive example that fits in that that context?
Positive, okay. We up Murphy's Road, we have got 5 landowners up there who are working with us. We finished off the planting there, and that has encouraged 3 other landowners to want to work with us next year. But equally, we've had 2 other landowners who've planted out their wetlands and streams adjacent to their neighbours. Is that sufficient.
That's a great example. Thank you. Last, this isn't a question, just a comment to kind of sum things up. Point 28. I do want to give a bouquet to the council officers and staff who were working on the presentation at the Love Local event. It was a fantastic stall, and went into great detail about all the mahi that's been doing there. So please continue to not forget the role of communicating the importance of this work, and that it is a long-term project. Kia ora.
Cool, thank you, Jeff. Just quickly, I'll note, perhaps unsurprisingly, we have a number of questions on this paper. So we've got Mayor Baker next, followed by Councillor Duncan, Councillor Leggett, and then Councillor Filo. So Mayor Baker.
Thank you. I do agree with you, Jeff. I don't think we tell everyone how great you're doing in this area, Nigel. Do we have any levels of the sediment reduction that from all the tree planting? Have we got any statistics coming through or not yet?
We will do. We have the bathymetry survey coming up early next year, but we've also done as part of the overall aerial photography that we've done recently to update the council system. The new provider has done a LiDAR survey of the harbour, so that'll give us an indication of there. And we're also, that's one of the purposes of the citizen science program, is to look at silt going into the streams. So that program is just starting up with all the community groups. So we've had 2 baseline surveys over the last 2 years, and that's given us an indication of the state of the streams as they are now. And we hope to be able to build on that. We've got 21 sites and 15 catchments, and that will give us an idea of how much sediment is going in or otherwise.
Okay, thank you. So I hope that we get to see those photos, or our residents get to see that what we are doing is working.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you.
And that will then be included in the final report.
Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thanks, Nigel. Sustainable Coastlines withdrawal. Why did they withdraw, and how have we actually made up for the loss of them from?
Okay. Sustainable Coastlines withdrew because basically COVID hit them hard in terms of their finances, and obviously they're an NGO, and that was a primary reason for that. And they decided at the time that they had about 5 of these types of projects around the country, and it was just eating into their resources a little bit too much. I think for our project, we were actually providing a good amount of funding, but in the other areas around the country, they simply could not afford to carry on. It's a bit sad, but in terms of us meeting that requirement, we have a community advisor and a schools advisor. So basically, the resources that we were directing at Sustainable Coastlines, we've had to bring in-house, and that has certainly, it's been very, very beneficial, to be quite honest. You will see a lot more communication now. That's been helpful. And the teacher that we've got for the schools program has been working in Porirua for some time and has all the links with all the schools, and that has been really beneficial.
Good stuff. And one last question. Item 18 and 19, the deed of funding, has been comprehensively reported. Do we get to see that reporting from that deed of funding?
If you want to, it's quite thick.
Yep.
I probably what might be easier is if I do a bit more of a summary for you.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
But a lot of that is contained within here.
Yep.
It's the reporting we have to do is financial. It's about specific sites and specific planning and.
Then it's probably not worth overloading me with that.
Yeah.
Then I appreciate it.
Government accountability requirements are incredible, so you're welcome to it, but probably a synopsis might be a better place to go.
My program managers here is certainly turning a bit more grey.
Yeah, I don't want to overload you with that.
Cheers. And so just a quick follow-up clarifying from that. So Sustainable Coastlines, it's not that they've withdrawn from our program, they've withdrawn from all of the sorts of programs they were doing in this area.
Yep, all of the freshwater programs. So they're still focusing on coasts and litter. It's just that freshwater is now no longer part of their program.
Cool.
It's a bit sad because we have actually lost corporate involvement. So we're trying to rebuild that.
Cool, thank you. Next was Councillor Leggett.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, go for it.
Great. Great work, Nigel. I just wanted, I see a number of plants mentioned and, in terms of plantings, can you give us an idea of the overall area that's been planted and what your target is?
All right. This, not off the top of my head. I can give you the number.
Might
of
have to
plants.
come back to
I'll
you,
have to come
Ross,
back
on
to you
that.
on that, Ross. Sorry. I know it's over 20 hectares, and overall, I'll have to go back to the original documentation to give you the area. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It was just out of interest because, that helps us see how we're going in terms of what our overall objective is as well.
Yep.
And, I guess the only other thing that worries me about all this is, we're doing all this planting, but, it's not a miracle. It will bring, hopefully, reductions in sediment and other things, but, it's not going to cure the problem.
No, and that's why we are actively working with the compliance and enforcement team. We've just introduced the sediment control guidelines for small operators, and we've just, Richard Hopkins and his team has done a fantastic job of addressing the sedimentation from small scale areas in developments. It's really working.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Cool, thank you, Ross. Next we've got Councillor Filo and then Councillor Ford.
Hey, thanks, Nigel. I just wanted to, I guess it's maybe similar to Councillor Leggett, maybe not. With regards to this side of the harbour, like Te Awaroa, are there, I'm just wondering about the streams that sort of link in with Te Awaroa Harbour. And are there many, because I heard a lot of sort of the Pauaha Nui, and I heard you sort of say that. Is there much going on this side of the harbour as well?
Oh, absolutely. A lot of the work that we've been doing with Greater Wellington is on the Belmont Regional Park. And so all of those tributaries coming into Kanapuru Stream, we've done enormous amounts of planting in there. All of the Mahenua Stream, Hukarita Stream, and they've all been pretty much planted out now with Ngāti Toa, so they're looking good. And we certainly have been working very hard with Wellington City, and we've done a lot of the tributaries in the Takapu Valley, and Wellington City on their own behalf have been working in the forestry blocks above Churton Park. So, yep, we're definitely making sure we try and cover off all those areas on the Onopoto side.
Have there been many Tawa schools involved in?
Yep, we had 15 Tawa schools,
Cool.
and I think there were about 1,000 students up there. So we work with an organisation that's part funded by Wellington City called Kete, and they work with the community groups and Wellington City Council to help do that. We've also been working on transpower land, because a lot of the pylons go through, in Takapu particularly. They've been very supportive and provided funding to assist us there.
Councillor Ford.
Thank you, Chair. I'll withdraw. The question was asked by Councillor Leggett and sufficiently answered by Mr. Clark. Thank you.
Cool, thank you very much. Are there any further questions? No, just the one question that I have, Nigel, is going into our next LTP cycle, is there anything that we should be thinking of or anything you want to draw our attention to that we may need to consider in relation to this program as part of the LTP?
Through the chair, I think your funding from MFE was a 5-year funding grant. So if you think an LTP is 3 years, your next LTP is 3 years, MFE funding would wind up after 2 years of your next LTP. So your conversation will be Do we want to try and get some more MFE funding, given this is a 20-year plus program? And is our matched funding there for year 6 moving forward? I would have thought that was the thinking. And we've got that on a whiteboard, if you like, with all our other numerous ideas for the LTP. It's large financial numbers.
Cool, and I guess just further to that, given what appears to me to be the success of this program so far, award-winning program and all that, are we approaching that with a degree of confidence?
Yes, I think so. Nigel, you're reasonably confident? I'm confident. Yeah, I actually, just as an aside, had a wonderful day yesterday where Wakakota, he confirmed all their funding for the Wanera to Onipoto work that we're doing. So, yes, we seem to be on a roll, Councillor.
Very good. How good is good news?
Right,
All right. Any final comments, Nigel? That covers off everything you wanted to speak to?
No, just it's going very well, and thank you for your ongoing support.
Cool. Thank you very much. All right. So noting that all we are doing here is receiving this report. It's been seconded already. So all those in favour, please say aye. Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much, Nigel. Now we are just about to move into public excluded, but before we do that, I just wanted to note that I understand this is our final council meeting with Jo, and that it's her last day here tomorrow. So I just wanted to take a very quick opportunity, Jo, to thank you very much for shepherding us through what has been a particularly difficult financial period at the council, and to wish you all the best. So thank you very much, Jo. So I will now move a motion for us to go into public excluded. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hayward, thank you very much. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That is carried. We'll move into public excluded.